On today's special edition of World Insight, full steam ahead with the first China International Consumer Products Expo in Hainan, the nation's first free trade port and duty-free hub. Is the expo a big hand on the road to global economic recovery? And we hear from the Uruguayan president on his nation's place in the global trading system and how his nation is using vaccines to contain the pandemic.
Chinese consumers are the backbone of China's growth, and likely that's of the world. Amid all global changes, the resilient buying power of Chinese consumers is bringing a rare sense of certainty. Of course, they deserve to be served with the best, and no less with this new and gigantic expo, the China International Consumer Products Expo. In Hainan, known as China's Hawaii. Take note, it's also China's first ever free trade port. And I'm here to feel the pulse of it all. And of course, a heavy duty-free shopping spree. Once we shop, we can't stop. Hello, I'm Tian Wei, and now I am in Hainan for the first ever China International Consumer Products Expo. Chinese President Xi Jinping sent his congratulations on the event, saying the expo offers a global consumer goods trading platform which opens opportunities in the Chinese market to the rest of the world. The expo also paves the way for global recovery and growth, while China brings more high-quality consumer goods to the world market. It's a sign of China's great buying power. As you can see, this is a significant event. I was inside the exhibition halls today, running around, really exhausted, but a lot of takeaways. And here are some of my thoughts. What's behind the Chinese consumers' buy, buy, buy? I am in Hainan, China's Hawaii, laid-back lifestyle, tropical sunshine, and now it will help let the world know how hefty Chinese consumer spending power has grown, how far China's economy has bounced back, and why important international businesses pin their hopes on the China market. With the first ever International Consumer Products Expo held in Haikou. And the world-renowned Chinese consumers are spending their way here. They buy, they drive, they travel, and they have always been on the look for better products and a better life. There might be too much exaggeration to say one single expo could do fortune-telling, the degree of China's bouncing back, but not when big signs point in the same direction. Stronger spending record than ever, even than before the pandemic, 2019 level. The passenger trips on the Chinese railways hit a new single-day high on the first day of the May Day holiday season last weekend. About 19 million trips recorded, up more than 9% from the pre-pandemic 2019 level. That coincides with several surveys done recently, which indicate the same message. For the first time since COVID hit in the late 2019, consumer confidence in China shot higher than its pre-pandemic level. Now, the Chinese government is losing no time in building momentum on that trend. In the month of May alone, there are major sales festivals being held in major cities across China. Shanghai, Beijing, Chongqing, Suzhou, Yangzhou, Guangzhou, just to name a few. Online and offline both active. And all these are not just about economic recovery after the pandemic, but also about how much space and confidence China can have when dealing with the complex international environment. As recovery comes in service spending in the United States and Europe during the second half of 2021, it might weaken, some say, demand for Chinese exports. So China needs to increasingly rely on its own consumers to drive demand. Meanwhile, the economies of both China and the US are likely to be emerging from the pandemic as the true global powerhouses. With domestic demand strong, China will be in a good position to work with the U.S. on many challenging issues between and beyond their bilateral relations if the U.S. is willing to commit, that is. A vibrant economy and the super spending power of Chinese consumers will be China's card on the table to help steer the world back on track, not with lip service, rhetorics, or ideologies, but with concrete results. All these make this expo ever more significant, and every deal made here counts. And I will contribute my part. Shop and don't drop. This is Tian Wei. I'm in Hainan. You're watching our special program from the first ever China International Consumer Products Expo. Who are the Chinese consumers? That's an ultimate question many would love to have the answer. For that, I talked to a group of economists coming from different parts of the world. And here is their take. For the China International Consumer Products Expo in Hong Kong, we have Ever Xie, Chairman and CEO of Gaofeng Advisory Company. In Singapore, Lim Tan Wai, Adjunct Research Fellow with the National University of Singapore. In Washington, D.C., William Li, Chief Economist from the Milken Institute. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Hainan's aspiration and its setting an example in terms of systematic reform, it's quite something for China. Mr. Xie, how do you look at the significance of this expo?
Hainan is going to play a special role in the opening up and the reform of China, given sort of Hainan's special status now given by the Beijing central government. So this is a significant event for Hainan.
Mr. Lim, even though very different in terms of systematic arrangement between Singapore and China, but looking at the expo, many say it seems that China is trying to lure more international investors with a new set of reform and opening up policies reflected by Hainan.
In the expo, we can see over 2,000 international brands, 1,200 international brands from 69 countries participating in the expo. It includes very high value-added brands such as Coach from US, Shiseido from Japan. There are also Southeast Asian countries that are also participating. So we can actually see that the Hainan is an offshore island. Southeast Asia is made up of two components, mainland Southeast Asia and maritime Southeast Asia. So Hainan definitely can be a platform to interact with maritime Southeast Asia, given its proximity and its distance from the trade in terms of maritime trade. So this gives an opportunity for both sides to get to know each other's products, get to know each other's merchants and distributors, and at the same time, allow the two great markets to tap into each other. After all, ASEAN has become the largest trading partner of China, and China can also tap into ASEAN's 500 million strong AEC, ASEAN Economic Community. So there appears to be complementarity through this expo.
Yeah, Mr. Li, of course, for the U.S., it's a totally different perspective as the relationship is not getting better as we speak. China has been making a lot of efforts to attract international attention and international investors and also international businesses.
Up until now, China has been specializing in manufacturing and exporting a lot of consumer goods to the rest of the world. Now with this expo, I think it's a great announcement that China itself is a consumer society that will welcome importing a lot of goods and services from the rest of the world. So from an American perspective, I think the challenge facing China is going to be to try to open up and bring in a lot of imported goods and services, but at the same time develop its own domestic industries.
Mr. Xie, Of course, for the free trade port, there's a whole set of new policies. And some of the policies can even, some say, compare to that of Hong Kong. We see a lot of internal competition also within China. For example, Shenzhen, Hong Kong, Shanghai, and now Hainan jumping into the pool. So it's very interesting to see all the different advantages and also the competition that is going on.
China is a big country. China's development over the years has been based on doing experimentation in different geographies and allowing the different experiments to see if it works. And of course, over the last several decades, most of the social experiments have turned out to be pretty positive. And it's largely because of the strong inter-competition across this kind of clustered experimentations. And I think, in general, what Hainan is trying to do is to be as competitive as it could be given the policies. And so I think it's going to, on one hand, to present some threats to places like Hong Kong. At the same time, it also would force places like Hong Kong to become better. So Hong Kong cannot stand still. Hong Kong needs to be better and compete with the likes of Hainan and vice versa. And ultimately, it's going to be just good for the consumers in general, but also for the companies who will participate in this game, like many of the companies who will be joining the expo.
It's very interesting to talk about the companies because the companies are quite torn right now. I talked to both the AmCham chairman in China and also the European Chamber of Commerce chairman in China. Both of them have briefed me about, the difficulties they are having as businesses to function in both worlds, namely a world in which China as the biggest consumer market almost in the world, and also a world in which the US is still the dominating, having the dominating say. So, Mr. Li, how do you see the international businesses, their enthusiasm for Hainan right now, and what does it say to Washington and to Washington and Beijing about they should work together?
The U.S. has been the world's importer right now. It's taking goods and services from everybody. And we have developed ways of doing things and laws that protect intellectual property and open up markets. I think the challenge for Hainan and the rest of China is that similarly adopt procedures that will enable companies to easily bring goods and services into Hainan. I mean, right now, the mainland Chinese have been going to Hong Kong to get a lot of Western goods and services. Now, I think the key is to be able to move the goods and services into Hainan in a way that allows the import to take place, but it also allow the intellectual property of these imported goods and services to be protected. So I think the challenge for the negotiators will be to have a consistent set of rules that will be used not just in Hainan, but in Singapore, in New York, in Los Angeles, and all over the world. And so harmonizing those rules and procedures will be the key challenge ahead.
Mr. Xie, is that the challenge that you see?
Personally, I believe that, I think many of the Western companies actually begin to get it, that in fact, you meaning a Western company, needs to be in China in a big way. It's not only for the market per se. Market is, of course, as Ms. Li was talking about already, is growing and so on. And so China is becoming more of a consumption center in addition to being a supply center to the rest of the world. But importantly, China is become the source of inspirations because of its vibrant innovations. And there's a lot of learnings that multinationals or foreign companies are getting out from China. And so foreign companies now finding increasingly that they need to be in China, not only for the money, but also for the learning and the knowledge that it generates from China. If they're not in China, they don't have a chance. And over time, they will lose their competitiveness across the world against their global competitors.
Very different opinions and from different perspectives. Mr. Lim, what about for you? Looking at China and the U.S. and a competition of attractiveness almost. One is rather using ideology. The other is trying to use the big market and the applications of the market to lure international investors.
Together with the China-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement and RCEP, the region appears to be moving towards the free trade within the region. And most importantly, ASEAN itself has ambitions to form the AEC, ASEAN Economic Community, and wants to work with China as well as other major economies in the world, like the US, to put together the free trade, as well as free flow of goods and services as well. So in this sense, some ASEAN countries can become the pathfinder for the East and the West, at the same time encourage intra-regional trading, as well as intra-block trading within ASEAN as well. So there's a lot of activities going on. So the main challenge right now that I think many ASEAN countries are looking at is probably the second stage of recovery from the pandemic. We all know the devastation of the first stage, which is still going on. But in the post-pandemic situation, ASEAN countries and East Asian countries are already planning for economic recovery in the second phase. So I think the two regions are consulting with each other to look at strategies moving forward of how to recover economically from the pandemic through greater inter-regional linkages.
There are other, strategies and a way of doing things to decouple, apparently, at least, Mr. Li, between China and the United States. That's what the U.S. Wants to do as China sees it. Mr. Li, do you think ultimately the U.S. vision about the international trade will be China and the rest of the world, or more divided than it used to be?
Speaking as an international economist and someone who's worked at not just the Federal Reserve, but the International Monetary Fund and Citibank, which is a multinational bank, for most of my professional career, I think the key idea to keep in mind is that there is no one solution for every country, and there's no one solution for every country's relations with other countries. Professor Lim has just talked about the regional trade pact that China has embarked on with the Asia Pacific countries. And that's completely appropriate, especially in this post-pandemic world where we need more localized supply chains. And I think that's a great solution for that. When you have longer supply chains stretching into Europe and stretching into South America and North America, that takes a different set of relationships. And I think often the Trump administration has talked about bilateral relations. I think that may be too narrow, but I think certainly there has to be some specialized considerations given for how trade takes place. Dr. Xi also mentioned that going into China is a key aspect for every company in the world. The solution was going to be very company by company and country by country. So I don't think the U.S. has got a vision of one solution fits all. It's going to be negotiated on a multilateral basis, a regional basis, and a bilateral basis. And these negotiations will take time, but they will accelerate quite quickly because as the economy opens up, the consumers in all the regions are going to want to travel, they're going to want to buy electronics, and they're going to want to be able to export entertainment like films and other things. So all of these markets will benefit from opening up in the right way, and not just one way.
Regionalization of supply chains, that seems to be what you suggested. Mr. Xie, how do you see that possibility? What do you consider as the likely way forward, realistically speaking?
What happened in the last several years, in particular, the relationship between China and the U.S. had, served to surface some of the underlying issues that we have not seen over the last several decades. But I think that if we analyze the situation, there are certain elements that is already been happening, and they exist, and they will continue to exist regardless of what. And that what I would refer to things like the fact that digital infrastructure in China is evolving much faster and much more in a more extensive manner than almost anywhere else in the world, including the U.S. And also, so if you're doing business in China and doing business in the U.S., you're facing with different set of digital infrastructure. Therefore, whatever you do on top of the infrastructure will need to be adjusted to the different conditions. That's number one. Number two is that some of the issues, they exist regardless of what. a prime example of that is data sovereignty issue. There's so much data that's being generated, and every country has its own way of looking at it. How do we solve the data sovereignty issue is an objective situation that one needs to address it. But if we look at the economic situation, the fact that globalization is still happening, in my view, there is some degree of regionalization of supply chain, because of different reasons. But largely speaking, we're also seeing, a new form of globalization where the double circulation policies of China is manifesting, meaning there's an external circulation, which is China with the rest of the world, but also a domestic circulation, which China tried to, become the supply center and the demand center at the same time. And this, in my view, is going to drive a new era of globalization. And therefore, supply chain is going to be evolved around this kind of new era. So I think that's what I mean by being complicated, because you have different elements at play, and companies or policymakers need to sort all this out.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. Mr. Lim, with that backdrop, I would like to go to you about that RCEP thing. That has been very much congratulated, but it's shall we say, technically it is a lower level of agreement. Of course, countries in the region, economies in the region are looking at even a higher level of agreement in the near future. China has also been talking about it's not impossible to join CPTPP. So how should we see the potential we are seeing today? And how will Southeast Asian countries work with provinces in China that seem to be, for example, Hainan, for example, Guangdong, for example, the special administrative region like Hong Kong and Macau? How will this relationship vitality be formed?
The Association of Southeast Asian Nations is a very useful platform for all major economies to come in and become a hub through which they can conduct their activities. If you look at the ASEAN, it does not exclude any major economies or powers. So you can see that for many decades in the 20th century, Japan, for example, has been building up production networking. At the same time, the region has been accepting investments from US multinational companies. And now ASEAN is actively participating with, engaging with China's Belt and Road Initiative. And ASEAN's many infrastructure needs, including the smart cities, the network of smart cities with the first over 20 cities that are earmarked to be advanced smart cities, can be a platform for all these major economies to come in and participate. And in this sense, Hainan can become a hub to connect between China and the AEC, ASEAN Economic Community. And ASEAN is fast becoming the so-called driver's seat when it comes to economic regionalization. So I think Hainan can tap into this sort of a hub and spokes model to engage with many other major economies in the world, using ASEAN as a neutral platform to engage with other economies and companies that are interested to work with Hainan in terms of partnership, joint ventures, investments, foreign direct investments, and many other economic activities. So I think you can probably see ASEAN playing a role as a hub and spokes model to connect all these economies.
Right. Before we go, I do want to have all your opinions about, the phenomenon of the so-called the Chinese consumers. It has already become a worldwide attraction. And we see that demonstrated in different parts of the world, before the pandemic. But now we're in a very different stage of Chinese consumers. I just wanted to share with us your images of Chinese consumers and what does it mean, to where you are. Mr. Xie, you want to go first?
Well, as you know, in Hong Kong, we did have a large share of visitors from mainland China over the years and until about 12, 18 months ago, right? And, they came in crowds. They're very energetic. They go for, big brands. They're not unwilling to spend money. They are energetic and aspirational and fun, actually.
Mr. Lee?
The Chinese consumer is single-handedly supporting the global luxury market. And I think that vision of the rich Chinese consumer is something that has been planted in everyone's head. I think the middle class of China is an undeveloped market right now, and the rest of the world is looking forward to serving that market, that rising middle class in China.
Mr. Lim?
Chinese consumption is very well known in Southeast Asia. It is already the largest source of tourist arrivals in Southeast Asia before the lockdowns and the pandemic. And ASEAN is certainly looking at reviving that with any global recovery in the pandemic situation. At the same time, ASEAN is also becoming aware of the high-tech products that are coming from China. They range from drones. China is already the largest producer of drones in the world, and also agricultural robots, as well as robotic and AI systems that can handle aging populations in East Asia. So all these technologies are fast becoming on the radar of consumers within Southeast Asia.
Well, Lim Tan Wai, Edward Xie, William Lee, thank you so much, gentlemen, for sharing with us. Really appreciate it. Greater buying power and the need for higher quality goods, China is opening up for top-notch products around the world. China's gigantic market has massive appeal to the world. The country has a bigger appetite for the best goods the world can offer, including agricultural products. Uruguay is one of the countries who saw the opportunity and seized it. Uruguay is now selling more beef to China than any other countries in the world. Earlier, I sat down with the president of Uruguay. He told me about his desire to cooperate more with China in various spheres. There are a lot of issues you have to consider as the president of your country. One of it is economic recovery and the economic stability. So what does that mean when you have a big battle against the pandemic being fighting within the country?
Yeah, and you know that we here in Uruguay have 4 cows and 2 sheep per person. So Uruguay's meat production is paramount to our economic well-being and even to our national identity. We are one of the countries in which meat accounts for a larger share of the total goods exports. Beef represents the largest share, but we are also important supplier of lamb. And in addition of that, we have the right natural and institutional conditions to develop also our poultry and our pork industries. Last year, our meat exports were affected by the lower demand that followed from the COVID-19 pandemic. However, in the first month of this year, 2021, our sales have shown resilience, a tremendous resilience, has begun to recover. Uruguay has strengthened its role as one of China's main beef and lamb suppliers.
Yes.
Actually, in the first 2 months of this year, our frozen beef and mutton export to China increased 34 and 36% compared to 2020. So we are confident to have this upgrade, and trend will continue all this year. I'm convinced that we have to work harder so we can ensure that the very healthy products of our country, of Uruguay, arrive to Chinese customers in the best possible way. We have to follow all the requirements agreed in our very ambitious and modern protocols. We have to do a lot of effort there.
In the world, there's a lot of debate about how the global trade system is likely to be reformed, and what does it mean to have equal shares coming from developing countries, emerging countries in the decision-making process when it comes to new rules. Mr. President, you want to shed some light for us as well?
I can tell you that to have equal shares, it's more a dream to pursue than other thing. But my country relies on our people, on our products, on our technology, our investigation. So we are prepared to go all over the world to do business. What we need is countries to open their borders, open their frontiers, to be aware that we have complementary economies worldwide. And I know that lots of countries tend to protect the productions. I understand. But our production is not large, but it's highly qualified. It's of a great quality. So the share in the markets for smaller countries should be one of the issues that big countries have on the top of their desk for having more freedom. To trade for us is freedom. To trade for us is to grow not only economically, but socially. So we need it, and that we will knock all the doors worldwide and all the organisms to try and open borders, open frontiers. And once again, we should know that we live in one world, and this pandemic, if leaves us something positive, is that we are in one world.
As you know, sir, we are facing a combination of interesting things, or shall I say, a combination of challenges, both the pandemic, unprecedented geopolitics for decades, and also the real innovation taking place in technological and science side. But there is an unprecedented lack of cooperation, as we have seen over the past few decades in the international community. Mr. President, what do you see as the way forward? Meanwhile, how do you, as the head of state of your country, be able to, at this point, figure out amid all the unpredictabilities, the way forward and the right positioning of your country strategically?
Countries like Uruguay have a need greater than ever for a strong multilateral system in which international law prevails. That for us is a main issue. In times like this, we are most mindful of the relevance of these principles, which are the core of our foreign policy tradition. Uruguay will also pursue greater openness, not only to trade and investment, but also, and you in your question, you mentioned it, to flows of people and ideas. We have to widen our minds. This is an area in which my government is doing some of the greatest efforts. We are committed to a vision in which Uruguay can become a magnet for people from all the world around, not only to spend their holidays, but also invest and live in our country. We have adopted several measures to facilitate such relocation processes. Obviously, the pandemic stopped a little bit that process, but we believe this is essential to our future and to develop as a nation. Our Chinese friends are also very welcome to explore opportunities of setting in Uruguay. it's a country, our country welcomes foreigners with open arms. That's part of our history. It is true that we live in a world where geopolitics play a very, very important role. In this context, Uruguay wants to be more and more center of excellency, a hub of innovation companies for all Latin America, and we are working on that strongly. We also want to elevate our production of high quality and healthy food. We have here lots of investigation going on in terms of food, in terms of agriculture, in terms of production. We also want to make our rivers and our ports and free zones and airports to be most efficient. That's a gateway in South America for Chinese, American, and European countries. We are ready to work with the Chinese government. We are ready to work and respecting differences, of course, but embracing, understanding, and cooperating.
I understand you had vaccine already. Tell me how you felt and what is the process like?
Yes, you know that Uruguay processes are high developed in Republican tradition. So when I decided to wait for the vaccine, I was just respecting this rich legacy of our ancestors. So I waited. My age is from 18 to 55. I am 47 just now. So my turn got in fourth or fifth group. And bueno, the people in the health system are very kind, are very professional, are doing a great job. And as I told you a few minutes ago, the people willing to get the vaccines, the percentage is growing very fast.
That's great.
People are getting trust in these vaccines. And we started over 30% of people willing to get the vaccination. And now we are far from 70, 80% people that will go to get the vaccine.
Congratulations, Mr. President. You and your colleagues' work finally bear fruit that people are more aware of the importance of vaccines now. And what is the content of cooperation between your country and China in terms of vaccines?
You know that last September, I was sitting just here and I made a phone call to Xi Jinping, President Xi Jinping, and he promised to distribute Chinese vaccines as a global public good. That was a very nice surprise. And he told us it will be available to people in every country besides China. So that was a very good message, straightforward, given by President Xi Jinping. Then we are very confident that China will supply more vaccines to Uruguay and other Latin American countries. They've already done it in a good quantity, in a very good time. So this bilateral and multilateral mechanism are working with China, and we are very grateful. We are very grateful for that, and we are ready to upgrade our bilateral cooperation in the area of health. I would consider it very firmly to a new stage. So this is done in the context of a strategic partnership, which has become increasingly comprehensive for us. We are living in a good time of our relation with China. I can tell you that honestly that we are very grateful once again and happy of this cooperation we are having together.
I want to congratulate you for your vision for getting vaccines for all your population, but there are still many countries that do not even have one jab of vaccines in the world. Mr. President, how do you see this global governance issue about the vaccines and vaccine nationalism?
I have to tell you that here there is a big failure of the international bureaucracy in health. Health, what is related to health. We started with the COVAX that we should be receiving some vaccines. Time went past, and as you have said, big countries, powerful countries, got from the laboratories a huge amount of vaccines. And more poorer countries and smaller countries weren't able to enter in that bargain, let's say. So today I was talking with a few presidents from Europe and the Americas, and that was a criticism that I made. And we have to learn from this pandemic. We have to learn. We have to learn to be aware of other countries, our people. We live in the same world. Pandemics go through borders of the countries, and we have to be prepared. We have to be prepared, be much more generous, think in others, and we cannot be once again in this competition where the strongest can win in the road of getting these vaccines.
And that's all the time we have for today. Our program is coming to you from the very first China International Consumer Products Expo in Hainan. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of my team here in Haikou and back in Beijing. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.